A claim that in 2024, researchers fed Grok, the AI chatbot built by Elon Musk's company, X AI, the entire book of Revelation, along with thousands of pages of historical, archaeological, and geopolitical data. The claim says the AI found hidden numerical patterns, mirrored literary structures spanning the whole Bible, and a statistical probability so small that the patterns could not be coincidence. The claim says Grok then cross-referenced this with current world events and arrived at a specific number, 98% certainty, tied to a timeline that pointed toward the rapture happening in the fall of 2025 and Christ's return by 2032. Some versions of the video swap in different dates. Some claim analysts were terrified. Some claim scholars were left speechless. The framing changes video to video. The core claim stays the same. Let's start with what is actually documented, because that matters more than what feels true. On July 16th, 2025, a group calling itself part of a gospel outreach project put out a release through Christian Newswire, a paid distribution service that anyone can use to publish a statement, the same way anyone can post to a blog. The release said that Grok, along with ChatGPT and a platform called Focal, had collaborated on a video declaring the Bible divinely inspired, and that Grok had produced a 98% certainty figure for the rapture happening in September or October of 2025. That date has already passed. Nothing described in the release occurred. There is no rapture, no confirmed prophetic event, and no follow-up release explaining why the number was wrong. The original claim simply stopped being repeated by the people who made it, while other creators kept using it anyway, often stripped of any context about where the number came from. That last part is the piece almost none of the viral videos mention. The 98% figure was not Grok independently analyzing scripture and reaching a spontaneous conclusion. It was the output of a prompt written by people who already believed the rapture was near, who gave the model their own theological framework and asked it to evaluate probability within that framework. Large language models like Grok are built to generate the most statistically plausible continuation of the conversation they are given. If you tell a model, in detail, that certain conditions constitute strong evidence for an imminent event, and then ask it how confident it should be given those conditions, you are not testing the model's independent judgment. You are asking it to reason forward from premises you supplied. Change the premises, and the number changes with it. This is not a flaw unique to Grok. It is true of every large language model currently available, including the one narrating this sentence to you. None of them run independent statistical hypothesis tests on ancient manuscripts. None of them have access to a hidden layer of truth unavailable to human scholars. They generate text based on patterns and training data in the specific way a question is framed. A pastor and researcher who runs a site cataloging prophecy discussions actually tested this directly. In May of 2025, he asked Grok to review years of his own writing and compose a first-person summary of his theological positions. What came back was careful, measured, and closely aligned with the mainstream biblical scholarship, not a dramatic countdown to anything. Separately, a minister who investigated one of the most shared viral videos, the one claiming Grok found hidden mathematical codes and something it called anticipatory logic in Scripture, found no published chat transcript, no screenshots, no shared session anyway. Reanalyzed. What he did find were several near-identical videos, same framing, same dramatic music, same narration cadence, released around the same time, a pattern that looks less like independent discovery and more like a content template being reused. When he asked Grok the same category of questions directly, it gave grounded answers in line with standard scholarship, not the cinematic verdict the videos describe. So if the specific numbers and dates are not something you can verify, what actually is real here? Quite a lot, and it deserves a clear-eyed look, because the reason this story spread is that it is built around genuine facts wrapped in a false conclusion. The book of Revelation is real, and its structure is genuinely remarkable. It was written near the end of the 1st century, traditionally attributed to John, most likely while he was exiled on the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea, off the coast of modern Turkey. It is written in Koine Greek, the common Greek of the Eastern Mediterranean at the time, and it belongs to a genre called apocalyptic literature, a style of writing that was well established in Jewish and early Christian tradition, built around vivid symbolic visions meant to communicate spiritual and political meaning to a persecuted audience, not literal newspaper headlines. Chiastic. Structure, the literary technique where ideas are presented and then mirrored back in reverse order, is a documented and widely studied feature of ancient Hebrew and Greek religious texts, not something an AI discovered. Biblical scholars have written about chiasm in Genesis, in the Psalms, in the Gospels, and in Revelation for well over a century, long before anyone had a computer to check it with. The number 7 does appear constantly throughout Revelation. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, and 7 is one of the most symbolically loaded numbers across the entire Hebrew Bible, tied to the 7 days of creation. None of this is a hidden discovery. It is core, well-documented content in any serious introduction to biblical literature, and any AI model trained on the internet would have absorbed this scholarship the same way it absorbed everything else, then repeated it back when asked, sounding fresh simply because the audience hadn't encountered it before. The geopolitical facts that get folded into these videos are also real and worth stating plainly without the prophetic packaging. Israel was re-established as a sovereign state in May of 1948, following nearly 2,000 years in which Jewish communities lived in diaspora after being displaced from the region in antiquity, most significantly following the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. This is a documented historical and political event, not a matter of interpretation. The Middle East remains one of the most geopolitically contested regions on Earth, with active tension involving Israel, Iran, and a shifting set of regional and global powers, and Jerusalem itself remains a focal point of religious and political significance for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam simultaneously. These are facts any serious news analyst, secular or religious, would recognize. What is not established fact is the claim that these conditions represent a checklist being completed on a fixed prophetic schedule. Regions have experienced recurring instability for the entire span of recorded history. Treating current instability as uniquely prophetic requires you to ignore just how consistently unstable this region, and frankly, most regions, have been across nearly every prior century. The technology angle deserves the same honest treatment. Digital identification systems, biometric verification, and central bank digital currencies are genuinely being developed and piloted by governments and financial institutions around the world right now, and that is worth understanding on its own terms as a real policy and privacy issue, independent of any theological reading. Separately, artificial intelligence has demonstrably reached a point where it can deceive real people in real high-stakes situations. In September of 2024, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, then chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, joined a Zoom call believing he was speaking with Ukraine's former foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba. The call was convincing enough, consistent with past encounters in both appearance and voice, that Cardin only grew suspicious when the impersonator began pressing him with unusually pointed political questions. He ended the call and reported it, and the State Department confirmed it had not been Kuleba at all. The FBI opened an investigation. This is a documented, confirmed case of AI-generated deception, reaching the highest levels of government, and it is a genuinely important data point about where AI capability currently stands. It says something real and serious about deception, verification, and trust in the digital age. It does not, on its own, tell you anything about a specific religious timeline. Conflating a real cybersecurity threat with a specific interpretation of a 2,000-year-old apocalyptic text is exactly the kind of leap these videos are built on, taking two true things and implying a connection between them that neither fact actually supports. Now, here's the part of the story that almost never makes it into the viral version, and it is arguably the most important part. The extraordinarily consistent history of people believing their generation was the one described in prophecy and being wrong. The earliest Christian communities, the ones Revelation was originally written to comfort and warn, largely believed they were living in the last days, writing under active Roman persecution with the expectation of imminent divine intervention. They were the original audience, closer to the text than anyone since, and they still didn't know the timing. In the mid-19th century, a farmer and preacher named William Miller convinced tens of thousands of followers, based on his own detailed calculations from the book of Daniel, that Christ would return on October 22nd, 1844. Followers sold their farms, gave away possessions, and gathered on hillsides to wait. Nothing happened. The date is still remembered in religious history as the Great Disappointment, and the movement that survived it eventually became the Seventh-day Adventist Church, built in part around the lesson that specific date setting had failed. In 1988, an author named Edgar Whisenant published a booklet titled 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988, which reportedly sold over 4 million copies. It didn't happen either. He revised the prediction to 1989, then to later years, and each time it simply didn't occur. Y2K brought a wave of prophetic anxiety tied to global computer systems supposedly heralding collapse in January. First 2000 arrived like any other day. In 2011, radio broadcaster Harold Camping predicted the rapture would occur on May 21st. With the same public confidence these AI videos now carry, followers spent savings on billboards warning the public, and when the date passed without incident, Camping revised his prediction to October of that same year, then quietly stopped making public predictions before his death a few years later. This pattern is not a minor historical footnote. It is close to a law of the genre, Every generation that has closely studied Revelation alongside its own current events has found convincing alignment, because Revelation was deliberately written using symbolic language broad enough to resonate across radically different historical moments, wars, empires, plagues, and persecutions, precisely so it could speak meaningfully to Christians living under many different regimes across many different centuries. That is a documented strength of apocalyptic literature as a genre, not evidence of a specific countdown clock. Jesus himself, according to Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, is recorded saying that no one knows the day or the hour, not the angels in heaven, not the Son, only the Father. This is one of the most direct statements in the entire New Testament, and it exists specifically as a caution against exactly the kind of date setting these videos promote. Mainstream theologians across nearly every Christian denomination, evangelical, Catholic, Orthodox, and mainline Protestant alike, treat that verse as a serious warning, which is why credentialed biblical scholars have been notably absent from the wave of viral AI prophecy content. The people building these videos are not, for the most part, biblical scholars. They are content creators who have identified a formula that reliably generates views, fear-based urgency wrapped in the borrowed authority of a machine that supposedly has no bias and no agenda. And that borrowed authority is really the engine driving all of this. There is something psychologically powerful about hearing an AI said it, because we have been culturally primed to treat computational output as neutral, as free from the human motivations that make us naturally suspicious of a preacher, a politician, or a pundit. But a language model is not a neutral oracle sitting outside human bias. It is trained entirely on human written text, shaped by the exact framing of whatever question it is asked, and it will confidently produce fluent, persuasive-sounding language regardless of whether the underlying claim is well supported. Ask it to find patterns confirming a specific outcome, and it is very good at finding language that sounds like confirmation. That is not a special property of Grok. It is a known behavior of every major model, and it is precisely why serious researchers do not treat a chatbot's answer to a leading question as independent evidence of anything. None of this means the underlying human experience driving interest in this story is fake. We are genuinely living through a period of overlapping global pressure, ongoing regional conflicts, rapid and disorienting technological change, economic strain, and a documented decline in institutional trust across many democracies. For people who hold religious faith, and for plenty who don't, that kind of instability naturally produces a desire to find meaning and structure in what feels like chaos. That instinct is not irrational, and it is not something to mock. Humans have always looked for pattern and purpose in uncertain times. It's exactly why apocalyptic literature was written and copied and preserved in the first place, to give people living through genuine hardship a mistake is not the desire for meaning. The mistake is outsourcing that search for meaning to an AI chatbot's response to a leading prompt, treating fluent, confident-sounding text as if it were independent verification, when what it actually reflects is the assumptions embedded in the question. So here is the honest, complete picture, stated plainly. Revelation is a real, richly structured ancient text with genuine, well-documented literary sophistication that biblical scholars have studied for well over 100 years. Current events in the Middle East and in AI-driven deception are real and worth understanding on their own terms, seriously and without exaggeration. What is not real, or at least not demonstrated by any evidence that has actually been published anywhere, is that Grok, or any AI system, has independently uncovered secret confirmation of a specific prophetic timeline. The 98% figure that made this story explode across the internet came from a single advocacy press release built on a leading prompt, not a reproducible study, and the timeline it predicted has already quietly failed to occur, the same way every specific end times date in recorded history has failed to occur. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. The next time you see a headline claiming an AI has confirmed a religious prophecy, or cracked a hidden code, or calculated the exact date of some world-changing event, ask a simple question before you share it. What was the model actually asked, and is there a transcript anyone can independently check? In almost every viral case like this one, the answer is that there isn't, and the number quietly disappears once its target date has passed, replaced by a new video with a new date and the same confident tone. That single habit, asking to see the actual prompt and the actual transcript, will do more to protect you from this entire genre of content than any amount of theological debate ever could. In September of 2025, an AI supposedly told the world the rapture was coming. The date came, the date went, nothing happened. And yet the video claiming it is still racking up millions of views right now because almost nobody who shared it ever checked where the claim actually came from. I did. And what I found wasn't a scientific breakthrough. It was a single press release, 7 paragraphs long, sent out from a small town in Maine. Here's the claim you've probably seen. In 2024, researchers supposedly fed Grok, the AI chatbot built by Elon Musk's company XAI, the entire book of Revelation, along with the thousands of pages of historical, archaeological, and geopolitical data, and asked it to build a timeline. The story says the AI found hidden numerical patterns and mirrored literary structures spanning the whole Bible, with a probability of coincidence and so small it was practically impossible. Then it supposedly cross-referenced all of it with current world events and landed on a specific number, 98% certainty, tied to a timeline pointing toward the rapture in the fall of 2025 and Christ's return by 2032. Different videos swap out the dates. The core claim stays the same in every version. So let's trace it back to where it actually came from. On July 16th, 2025, a small gospel outreach project put out a release through Christian Newswire, a paid distribution service anyone can use, the same way anyone can publish a blog post. That release claimed Grok, along with ChatGPT and a lesser-known platform called Focal, had collaborated on a video declaring the Bible divinely inspired, and that Grok had produced a 98% certainty figure for the rapture happening that September or October. That date has all real. Had he passed? Nothing described in the release occurred. No follow-up explanation was ever published. The claim simply stopped being repeated by the people who made it, while other creators kept recycling it anyway, stripped of any context about where the number came from in the first place. That missing context is the whole story. The 98% figure wasn't Grok independently analyzing scripture and arriving at a spontaneous conclusion. It was the output of a prompt written by people who already believed the rapture was near, who handed the model their own theological framework and asked it to rate the probability inside the framework. Large language models generate the most statistically plausible continuation of whatever conversation they're given. Tell a model in detail that certain conditions represent strong evidence for an imminent event, then ask how confident it should be given those conditions, and you're not testing independent judgment. You're asking it to reason forward from premises you already supplied. Change the premises, the number changes with it. This isn't a flaw specific to Grok. It's true of every large language model available today, including the one writing this sentence. 2 people actually tested this. A pastor who runs a prophecy research site asked Grok in May of 2025 to summarize his own theological writing in his voice. What came back was careful and measured, closely aligned with mainstream biblical scholarship, nothing resembling a countdown. Separately, a minister investigating one of the most shared viral videos, the one claiming Grok, found hidden mathematical codes in scripture, went looking for the original chat transcript. There wasn't one. No screenshots, no shared session, nothing anyone could verify. What he did find were several nearly identical videos, same framing, same dramatic music, same narration cadence, released around the same window of time by different channels. That's not evidence of independent discovery. That's a content template. None of this means the underlying human instinct here is fake. The book of Revelation really was written roughly 2,000 years ago, likely by John while exiled on the island of Patmos, and its structure genuinely is remarkable. Chiastic structure, where idea, S are presented and then mirrored back in reverse, is a real, well-documented feature of ancient Hebrew and Greek religious texts, studied by scholars for over a century, long before any AI existed, to discover it. The number 7 really does saturate the text. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, tied to deep symbolic roots going back to Genesis. Israel really was reestablished as a state in 1948 after nearly 2,000 years of diaspora. The Middle East really is one of the most contested regions on Earth. AI-generated deception really is a documented, serious threat, the kind that fooled a sitting U.S. senator on a Zoom call in 2024. All of that is true and worth taking seriously on its own terms. What isn't demonstrated by any evidence actually published anywhere is that an AI independently uncovered secret confirmation of a specific prophetic date. And history should make us cautious here, regardless of the technology involved. The earliest Christians believed they were living in the last T-days. A 19th century preacher named William Miller convinced tens of thousands that Christ would return on October 22nd, 1844. A 1988 booklet predicting the rapture that year sold over 4 million copies. Harold Camping predicted May 21st, 2011 with total public confidence, revised it to October when nothing happened, then quietly stopped predicting altogether. Every one of these was treated at the time as undeniable. Every one of them was wrong. Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 24 is recorded saying that no one knows the day or the hour, not the angels, not even the Son, only the Father. That line exists specifically as a caution against exactly this kind of certainty. The pattern holds up remarkably well 2,000 years later. What changed isn't the prophecy. It's who's making the claim and how convincing the packaging has gotten. If this kind of fact check was useful, Subscribe for more breakdowns of viral claims before you decide whether to believe them, and drop a comment with the next AI story you want investigated properly.